Hello, I'm Jez Smith and welcome to idea number 16 from the book Humans Are Not Resources, 50 Great Ideas for Managing a Modern Lean Agile Workforce. Now this idea is called Experiment with User Story Job Descriptions, and to be honest it's one of the ideas in the book I'm most excited about. I think could potentially be the most useful to organisations, but it's also possibly one of the most challenging and the most transformative in how organisations do things. Now the problem comes from the fact that many organisations are moving towards more lean and agile ways of working, but the way they write their job descriptions and the way they write their job advertisements from those job descriptions hasn't changed. They're still fundamentally a list of tasks and a list of attributes. You know, we need someone to do these things. Here are all the tasks we want them to perform and achieve, and these are the attributes we need from that particular person in order to achieve these tasks. And that works for other types of roles. It works for roles in simple and predictable environments. You're working on a production line, you need someone to operate a certain piece of machinery, you can specify the things they need to do with that machinery up front, you can specify the sorts of training they must have had, they're trained in that machinery, they're trained in health and safety, etc, etc. Potentially they need X years experience working with that type of machinery. Fine, you can specify that. It's not, as long as someone meets the specification, they come in and they'll be able to perform the job on the production line, all completely fine. It's not inherently a wrong approach in and of itself. The problem comes when you're working in environments that aren't simple and predictable, when you're working with complexity and uncertainty, because that's the point of kind of a lean agile transformation in an organisation, is to help the organisation cope better with complexity and uncertainty. Uncertainty in the work they're doing, you know, they're innovating, they're creating new things they've never done before. There's a lot of uncertainty around that internally, and also in uncertainty and a fast pace of change in the external marketplace too. You know, our customers' needs are changing, the technology is changing around us, what customers expect is changing, our competitors are evolving and changing direction at a rapid rate. We're working in a complex and kind of uncertain environment. But what we're doing effectively with our job descriptions and job advertisements is still doing that big upfront design, still writing a detailed specification up front, you know, potentially by committee as well, bringing lots of people together to make sure we capture all the tasks we need the role to do and all the sorts of attributes we think the person must have. But how do you know in a complex, uncertain, fast-paced, rapidly changing environment what the person will need to be doing in the future? You don't. What the person does is as much something that's going to change as the products and services they help you create for your organisation. You inspect and adapt your product and your process. So if your process is changing, the things people need to do will change as well. So your upfront specification is much more likely to be wrong. I also notice a phenomenon in here that reminds me of a slightly obscure example, but it's a kind of interesting one. The god Odin in Norse mythology had a horse called Sleipnir, and Sleipnir had 8 legs. Because if you imagine, you know, a 4-legged horse, pretty good, can run pretty fast. An 8-legged horse must be an awesome horse, could run even faster, jump even further, all that kind of stuff. You know, a horse worthy of a god like Odin had 8 legs. And this is what you often see in job descriptions and job advertisements, that people get together, they write big upfront specifications and they massively overload them. So you end up in a situation where effectively you're advertising for an 8-legged horse, which doesn't exist. Norse mythology is called mythology for a reason. I had it once where someone got in touch and said they were looking for someone certified to a very, very high level in a certain agile framework, had these sorts of skills and experience, and also spoke Swedish. And I said to them, well, I could introduce you to both of those people, because as far as I know, there are only 2 people in the world who meet that specification. Here are their email addresses. I hope that's of use. It wasn't really a job ad. They'd massively overloaded it to the point that they didn't understand what they were doing, and narrowed it down to basically 2 people, neither of whom I imagine would have been particularly interested in the job. They're doing very well as they are themselves. You also get a problem where sometimes people unthinkingly, because they don't know what they're doing, copy other job advertisements and other role descriptions from other organisations. You genuinely see entire paragraphs copy and pasted across different organisations, which of course is even worse, because then you're not just kind of doing a big upfront design for a situation that's too complex and uncertain to know upfront. You're using someone else's big upfront design from their particular context. So it's even less likely to match your context. Even if the big upfront design were right for their context, in the rare event it might be, it probably isn't right for your context. So people end up just copying and pasting without really understanding what they're doing. And actually, whilst I mentioned context, context matters. And very often we see that missing in job ads as well. We're not saying, are we saying to people, come and join our organisation, we've been on a 10-year journey around lean and agile, we're really good at this sort of stuff, we know what we're doing, that's where we are. Or, our organisation is just starting off down this path and we need someone who can kind of work at that level. And fundamentally, agile people are problem solvers. Lean agile people like encountering problems and solving them. So when you have a big detailed upfront specification for someone to meet and a series of tick boxes for them to check off to help them get the job, that's not very attractive to them. You're turning off your potential lean agile talent again. So what's the solution to this? I think the solution is already there within some of the agile frameworks themselves. It's a phenomenon called user stories, because this is the way agile frameworks like Scrum and Extreme Programming and Safe and Less and so forth deal with this complexity and uncertainty. They don't write upfront detailed specifications saying, we need to do these things. They write what are called user stories. They set out, who the person is that needs this particular solution, this particular feature, whatever it is, what they want to do and why they want to do it. Generally expressed in the format of I want to, so that, as a type of user, I want to do this so that I can achieve those things or whatever. And then you leave the solution open to the teams doing the work. You're saying to them, this is the user outcome, the problem the user has, this is the outcome they want to achieve, this is why they want to do it. But we're not going to tell you how to achieve that. You work that out as you go through the work. User stories are very different from requirements and specifications because they leave a lot of uncertainty in there. They're a placeholder for a continuing conversation. As people say, did you mean this or did you mean that? Do you think this would work or should we do it this way? Here are a couple of options. Let's test them. Let's see what works. And we inspect and adapt and evolve as we go along. So I think we could apply this approach to job descriptions and especially job advertisements as well. Why not write out what your organisation needs to achieve or what different people in your organisation needs to achieve? As a chief executive, I want to see business value or revenue go up 10% so that we can grow the business into these particular markets. And then the people who apply for the jobs get to propose their solutions to that. This is how I would try and solve this, which suddenly becomes a hugely more interesting process. Rather than, this is how I meet your criteria, it becomes much more, this is how I would add value to your organisation. These are the sorts of things I would do. The other thing you find with user stories is typically they're held on a backlog, and that backlog is ordered or prioritised. So the most important user story at the top, next most important, and you work through them in that order, in that kind of priority order. But that can change. As new information emerges, as you do new things and you discover new things, it may well be that the order, your prioritisation of your user stories changes. And that could be really interesting to add into your job application and sort of interview process as well. To say, this is our current ordering of our sort of user stories for this role, but would you change them? Would you say, actually, in your experience, some of these are more important than others, some are less important? You're giving another way for candidates to engage with your problems and propose solutions to them, which becomes so much a richer interview process, hiring process. Even the initial application could ask people to reprioritise them and explain why. You're genuinely getting an understanding of who the candidate is, what they'll do, what sort of motivates them, their previous experiences, all that kind of stuff. You're really playing to their strengths. And also you're demonstrating to them that you get it. You get this kind of complexity and uncertainty, and you're going to give them the freedom and the autonomy and the mastery and the purpose and all that good stuff around how they're going to do their job when they turn up. You're demonstrating your organisation that really understands this. So obviously, changing how you write your job descriptions and especially how you run your hiring process isn't something you just do overnight. There's many checks and balances. There's many reasons why current hiring processes are as they are. Fair enough. But what I'd like you to try as just an experiment around this hypothesis is just try it out. See if you could write user stories for a role you're hiring for, or a role you're going to be hiring for in the future. You know, as AI want to, so that. And then experiment with letting candidates, even just an interview, give them the list of user stories and say, how would you solve these problems for us? And do you think we've got these in the right order? Or do you think you'd reorder them, reprioritize them based on your experience? And just play around with that in an interview as part of your wider interview process, and see what happens. See if it starts to work. If it does work, maybe look at taking that approach a bit further. Maybe look at actually putting out job ads that are user stories, and growing this into your approach. Because I think it's hugely important to get away from this big upfront design and specification we use when we're hiring people, and when we're sort of expecting people to do things in the workplace, and move much more towards an approach that allows us to handle complexity and uncertainty. That's what user stories are for. They're already there, they're already proven, and I think they could add huge amounts of value in this particular space. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, feel free to leave a like on this video, that would be lovely. If you've got any comments, any feedback, if you try this in your organisation and you want to let me know how it works, that would be fantastic. Feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you really enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more videos like this coming up.